Hello, CV. I am Isaiah Williams. I will be your host of this podcast. It's called Media and Talk, as you will see from the title once this is released. With me, I have Andrew too.
Andrew too, yeah.
Say hello.
Hi guys.
And then we have Ella.
Hi, I'm Ella Obiama. I didn't have my last name on there, but
Yeah.
Ella's iPhone.
We may have the giggles. We may have the giggles now, but we have a very interesting discussion on how media can be used to inspire. So, I guess we'll hop right into it. One of the first questions I have is, how has media inspired you to think more creatively about controversial or heated topics?
These are such good questions. Who wants to take it away first? The next question.
Since you're talking, you.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, so this is about being creative about social media, being creative about controversial topics.
Yep.
I think this kind of relates back to the fact that like social media, for me at least, gives me more just resources and like information about controversial topics. So like I don't know if we should bring any up, but just in like an example of like Roe versus Wade, because that's current right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get more information through social media that way, because you see a lot of these like posts about like, oh, like my body, my choice, or pro-choice, or if you're on the other side, pro-life or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you see a lot of those more, so you get a little more of those resources. And then obviously in those Instagrams you can click links and they have resources linked there too. But with that, how we were talking about earlier, comes with the big spread of misinformation, which I think also, if you think about creativity, I think it just inspires me more to get involved with just like with all these movements or anything like that. So I think that's kind of my answer on that.
And because I mean, just bouncing off on that, before we get to you, Ella, social media can add a level of knowledge that can make you more creative in your approaches to different topics, and even expand, in my opinion, your thought processes, where you're not limiting yourself as much, which is always amazing. So I hope that through these talks, it also inspires you, listeners, to stop and think more creatively about your thoughts and be open to other thoughts. Now, Ella, take it away.
All right, so kind of I'm sort of going to connect both of those points. The idea of how social media opens your eyes to a lot of different things. I think so. We're both officers for power, and there would not.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
There would be power without our club at CV that focuses on diversity and equity. Which it started because older students here saw a need for it, and they were able to, through social media, learn about issues. And they wanted a space at CB that could talk about these issues, and there wasn't one. So social media has opened up a lot of doors for, I think, particularly young people to start having dialogues that were not previously had.
Yeah, great.
Wow.
Great answer.
Yes. Great
Better
answer.
than mine.
Oh, everything's good here. All right. So, and I mean, both of you can answer this. This next question. Again, I did for this podcast now. I did just to let everyone know too. I did have to change some things with how I would be presenting this. So some of these questions that I do have might seem weird, but hey, we'll still get a good discussion going on. Being someone in the majority, do you think your representation is true to life or needs to be improved?
Is this am I answering this one?
Yeah.
Or So again, I think Andrew is also going to talk on this. I feel like we're both in an interesting intersection of the majority. So my dad immigrated from Nigeria when he was 11. My mom is white. So I've definitely seen two different perspectives. And your question was, do
you think representation is true to life or needs to be improved?
Representation.
Yeah, so like
of the majority.
Yeah, the majority.
I think in terms of my upbringing in a very white area and like that side of my family, I think there's definitely representation in that aspect. So it's definitely an interesting like intersection, seeing two completely different worlds, and you can see the lack of representation in one and the like clear representation of another, and wanting to like show this other side of yourself, but there's not as much representation for it. If Andrew has anything to add. But
I feel like I'm in this gray spot as well, because of the fact that like I feel like you don't consider like specifically the Asian community as a majority, but you also don't consider them a minority either. I think technically we are labeled as a minority because we don't have as much privilege as a white person, but yet we have more privilege than other communities, like the Black community, for example. I think like we're kind of like in that weird gray spot, like where I don't really know where I personally fall, because I think some people will argue with me whether I am majority or minority. So I'm kind of always like, I'm in the middle. But like I grew up, like both of my parents are Chinese. I am full Chinese. So I grew up just surrounded by Asian culture. And that's what I grew up with until I started public school. I did not speak a lick of English. I went to school and I was like, I'm showing up here. I don't know English, but I'm here. And it like opened my eyes, like I was so surrounded by like and immersed in my culture that I didn't even realize like there's a bigger group out there. And right when I entered public school, I realized like there's not a lot of me in public school, I guess, like representation wise. I just like, we grew up in a predominantly white community, obviously. So I was just like, and like not everybody just understood like where I'm coming from in a sense. Like I just see the lack of representation even in like the media. Like you could see it, like there's a lack of Asian representation, and like just other communities in general. But I like, for me, like I think public school opened my eyes to see like how much of like almost a minority I am, almost in a way.
Yeah, and I'll just hop on that train as well. Being Black, full Black, in more of my beginning lives, now that it has gotten at least a little bit better, I really did feel like the other. Like there wasn't really, the only like real representation was like drugs, guns, things like that for a Black person. So it always like, oh well, I need to grow up and be that. And there are parts of, and I will just say, it's not that representation is in itself bad, because that is a big part of Black culture too. I can't deny that. But if that's the only representation, there's even and it's still like a lot less representation than white representation, then there's still the problem there that I'll still be placed in the other, even as I'm growing older.
I think bringing up the whole like media thing again, I think we as minorities are portrayed as a certain stereotype and a certain stereotype only. And when I went to public school is when I realized that racism exists. And then people place you in certain categories that you obviously don't necessarily fit in. Like, for example, there's a very big thing about Asians cats and dogs, which is it's not true in every single culture. Like, yeah, they do in some cultures, but I never will. Those things are my friends, not my food. And so when I went into public school, I didn't even know this was even a thing. I had no idea that this was even a stereotype or anything like that. And then when it got placed on me, like I always felt this like resentment because I didn't even know it was racism. I never had that cognitive label of racism like until I realized it was, and that took me about I think maybe 5 or 6 years later to finally label that like, oh, that was racism. And I feel like that stereotype is still portrayed in the media with Asian culture. You see like, oh, like they eat cats and dogs, or you have to be really, really smart, or they're really good at math. Like
Mhm.
you still see that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that a lot. It's a problem, but hopefully we're getting better.
So
My third question, what does using social media for inspiration, not comparison, mean to you?
Ooh.
again, these are good questions.
These are good questions. Oh, I feel like you can piggyback off of this one because you start. I'm thinking more on the power sense, and you started that one with the first question.
Mhm.
That's what I'm thinking. So I think maybe you have more insight to it.
Oh,
But I also,
I can connect this to power, but I'm thinking there's so many ways I could go with this. So sorry, I'm
I
so
feel like you have. I think you have more. I think you have more connections than I do right now.
Again, I think power is again the result of inspiration. I would say I think there is too much comparison and too much negativity that I think that inspiration can get overshadowed. And there is a lot of that. I think in my own experience, I've seen it probably more as comparison. I think as like young people, I think particularly as young females, there can be a lot of like expectation
Mhm.
on social media. But I think if you use it in many ways as inspiration, there's a lot of positives that can come out of it. Yeah, and this power is one of those things that has come out of it. But
Mhm.
that's my
I
take on
think
anything.
I think like as inspiration and not comparison, like obviously like Ella said, young girls get compared a lot. We are pinned up against each other a lot in social media, whether it's with likes, body type, or whatever. But like you can use that comparison and that like pinning up to spark inspiration, like how a lot of brands now are starting to include plus size women into their campaigns, which is huge, and that's a big step in the right direction in inclusivity. So I think that's a way also that you can use social media as a like almost not comparison, but like as inspiration that maybe stemmed from comparison to make it into something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 100%. Because uh, for me, every time I think of like comparing myself to someone else, or comparing myself, or just comparing like people to other people, a part of me always just wants to stop and be like, okay, but is it, can you constantly be putting people in boxes? Can you constantly be putting yourself in a box where you feel like you need to follow this box and that box? No,
Mhm.
you can use all of those boxes as inspiration to become better, to improve. And I feel like that's something that we as a species need to think about more, especially with social media being as big as it is. Using all these negatives as inspiration to create a positive. Yeah.
There is a lot. Sorry if I'm cutting someone off.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
There is so much potential in social media. Kind of like you were saying, this is something so new and something so discovered, or this is something so new to our age. Yes, unprecedented to our age group. There's so many ways we can go with it, and I hope we are going in a positive direction with it. I think there's a lot of positive directions we can go, and there's also a lot of negative directions you can go. And I don't think it's necessarily one or the other, but I hope those positives will overshadow the negatives that may come in the future.
It seems like we've been in the step in the right direction with obviously the body positivity movement, Black Lives
Mhm.
Matter, Stop Asian Hate. Like we are going somewhere, but does that mean we are getting the message spread across as easily? That's the debatable part. And I think that's obviously this is unprecedented. We're the first generation to pretty much do this. So I think it's just something that it's just gonna be trial and error as you just experience it.
Mhm. And that's what a lot of this is, trial and error. And I hope that the trials lead to something amazing. All right, fourth question. Don't worry, guys. We're almost done with this episode. There'll be 3 episodes afterwards. I don't know. I don't think I said that. 2, because it's math. Do you think any form of activism is good, or do you think people who just post online aren't activists?
I know you touched on this one earlier. I feel like, girlie, you should take this one away.
Sorry, I am back. My house is noisy. But we were just having this conversation about
Yes.
social media and if it is productive to a lot of the conversations or topics I think young people are trying to address on social media. And I think there is a lot of productive arguments that are brought up, or you're learning new things that previously people would have been ignorant to, and people would not have had that access to learn about. But at the same time, people need to act on those things. And I was saying, particularly if you look at like Black Lives Matter or a lot of the like newer discussions that are being had, people are very upset and people are learning. And this is, again, new information coming, I think, for a lot of people. But the action on it, I personally have not seen a major change in action that came with it. In terms of, are people voting more? Are people more engaged in their government? We were just talking about voting turnouts have not really changed much. If anything, they've lowered. And I think that's where we have to really start to make change. So I don't necessarily think it is that productive in that aspect, but if anything.
I think like for WLA and for Power, you see us post about activists a lot, or we talk about certain activists a lot, which I think is very important to talk about these people who I'm thinking about Tanya Burke, for example. I think is how you pronounce her name. She started the hashtag Me Too movement. And I remember I made a post about her for WLA, including I think a couple other people helped me with it. It was a group project. But I think it's important to spread those messages. But it seems at time like not everybody pays attention to what the actual content is. I think a lot of people just look at the pretty infographic and they're just like, oh, cool, that's it. But like they don't actually sit down, they actually don't read the infographic or like the bio or description or whatever. They don't actually sit down and read it. So I think spreading these activists are both a pro and a con. A pro being in the way that you get these great people out there and you spread their like message out more and like who they are, because maybe not a lot of people know about who started the Me Too movement. But at the same time, it's a con because not everybody reads into it, so they're just reposting a post that they don't have any information, they don't really know anything on.
And that's and I think I want to pull this back into my topic of inspiration. Why isn't it used? Why isn't these online posts being used to inspire the people who are posting them to do more? And that's something when coming up with this question, I constantly thought about was, well, even in my research, why don't people do more if they do believe in something? And for the sake of this last question, I won't say that we want to dive too deep into it, but just what are your like base level thoughts on that?
Oof. I think people I think people think that social media is sufficient and spreading information is sufficient,
Mhm.
and they don't really think they need to do more. I think we're young people with a lot of or in terms of social media, it's mainly people that are very passionate and want to share a message. But I think it's just about going a step further
Mhm.
and spreading what can we do about this message. And I don't think there's as much conversation about what can we do in this message. And maybe if social media had more of those dialogues on what do we, so this is, we can look at an issue and not just talk about it. What can we do about this issue? I think if our conversations maybe moved in that direction, that would be beneficial. But
I think some people like I think people think social media is powerful enough to make that change. When we were talking about this earlier, it's just the first stepping stone in making that change. It's literally the first little platform you have to go on before you make the big jump into the change. And I think also some people don't know what to do next. Some people are fearful because you've seen what happens at the rallies, the riots, or whatever you like to call them. People get tear gas, people get pushed, people get hurt. And I think some people aren't willing to put themselves out there because of that fact. Which obviously going to that, it's scary. I totally get it. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, it's kind of like almost like, I forget what it's called, but it's not mob mentality, but like you hiding behind a screen, you kind of think that you have more power than sometimes you really do.
yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely get where you're going with that, because it to a certain point, yes, you do get a power, but at the other point, it's limited in the long run. And and you actually getting up and doing something could make this go even farther. Like, you can be an activist. What you're doing is an act of activism. Yes, words. But you're not an activist, in my opinion, if you just post and you don't do anything past that. And I mean, this last question, these two are in power, so and WGAL.
WLA Liberation Alliance.
I went to a news site, to a news source. Sorry.
The whole new club. Okay.
Well, I mean, still, this next question: what strides have you made to inspire others on social media?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I feel like this is hard because Ella and I in Power are in part of Bulletin Board. And so like we're not really in charge of social media as much. Kayla does social media. So I feel like she would know she would answer this question a lot better than we do. Like we can, but
Also in your just your normal lives, what have you done too? Like outside of Power, outside of WGL, like what else?
WGL.
What?
WLA.
I really need that G in there for some reason. WLA.
So funny. Sorry.
So how we in our personal lives use social media?
Yeah, to
spread
inspire
good
others.
Inspire others.
Yeah. Do you?
I know we just bash people about posting posts a lot, but I think that's what I think a lot of us do. We just post those informational posts you see on Instagram. Personally, I try to fact check mine as much as I can. I try and I look through it and I read through it and I either like make sure I like Google the same topic and like check a reliable source like New York Times or something like that to make sure they align up pretty well before I post it. Or I do more research on it and with reliable sources. Just because I don't want to spread misinformation. So I guess that's something I do. And I know we were just kind of bashing those types of people. But that is what I end up doing at the end of the day. And I just remember this one post I made, not post I made, sorry. It was like one post I reposted. It was like, English should not define like how smart you are.
Mhm.
And that, then it was just a cartoon of a person and then that little thought bubble, and like I got a lot of people's reaction out of it. Like people slid up on my
Mhm.
Instagram story being like, "This is so true." Like, well, like I think people need to hear this more, and I think that's a way to get people talking about it because I had some good conversations with people who felt the same way as me
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
that.
So I would say my probably biggest social media, or in terms of like spreading awareness or spreading anything really, over, so again, like we just had in 2020 a major like I don't know how to describe it, like a spike in the Black Lives Matter movement or a big uprising.
Mm.
And through that there were a lot of people promoting Black owned businesses,
Mhm.
and I was able to hear a lot about those and was actually able to get um, again, this kind of connects to power, and both personally I was able to promote businesses just through social media, and people again were signing up like, oh, that business seems really, really cool, I'm going to buy things from them.
Mhm.
But even power, we were able to get involved in a Black Business Expo, and we were able to spread information about that through social media. So even just supporting Black owned businesses, that's probably been my favorite moment, like through social media. But,
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And truthfully, this this and the next two episodes are truthfully just a, hey, we want to give you a prompt to truly look at what you do on social media, or just how you, or just what you think, and please just try to expand it, because trust
Mhm.
me, there is so much good that can come out of this. And
Mhm.
I and I promise you, reading a couple articles aren't that bad. All right, I promise you. Uh, but that does it for this episode. And again, like I said, we'll have two more after this, so stay tuned. And well, see you on the flip side. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.